Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I hope you're having a good start to your week. Now, I do have a question for you guys. Is it just me or did this week start off? It might just be me, but I had the hardest time finding loads for my business partners yesterday. And one was in Houston, Texas. The other one was in Lafayette, Indiana. Not the greatest places, I admit, but they're not horrid. So yeah, that was very, very strange. But anyway, that was yesterday. Today is today. Today, we're going to be focusing on capacity insights as well as macroeconomics that are driving the freight industry. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I teach about the trucking industry with a heavy focus on the spot market as well as freight market analysis. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe down below. So yes, today we're going to be focusing on capacity as well as macroeconomics. But macroeconomics this time will be focused on produce season. We're going to be dissecting USDA data. Personally, I am sick and tired of waiting for produce season to hit, so it's time to dig. Ready? Let's go. Okay, first things first, a chart by FTR, net revocations of trucking authority minus reinstatements. Basically, this chart shows us how many carriers left either voluntarily or involuntarily last month and the months prior. So what we can see right away is that here we are May, right? This is May. We can see that the revocations, they skyrocketed in May. To give you an idea, they went up by 23% since April. Now, the funniest part, if we look at this chart as a whole, net revocations in May were the third highest in their recorded history since 2010. So that is saying something. So why did this happen? Why did net revocations go up so much? Well, partially it's because voluntary revocations went up since April, meaning that more and more carriers voluntarily gave up their authority to operate. But the biggest reason is the involuntary revocations. Those skyrocketed. Why do involuntary revocations happen? Well, for several reasons. BOC3 is not updated or not on file. There might be a safety issue with the carrier. There are multiple reasons why this could happen. But whatever the reason, we can see that net revocations really kind of shot up into the stratosphere last month. As for the new carriers, these are carriers who just got their operating authority granted. We can see that in the month of May, they did decrease. Wow, that's a horrible arrow, but they did decrease, which means that less carriers entered the market in the month of May. Now, if we look at the big picture, even though the amount of new carriers did decrease, we can see that it's still way higher than pre-pandemic, which tells us that even though carriers are maybe not as eager to get into the trucking industry right now, which is not a surprise, the market is not the greatest at the moment, to say the least, they're still much more eager than they were before the pandemic. My theory is that because of what happened when COVID hit and because of the boom of 2021, the trucking industry in general got on everyone's radar as a place where you can make an insane amount of money. And since then, ever since that happened, people are more eager to get in to the trucking industry. Unfortunately, what people seem to not understand, and this is especially applicable to newbies, is that what happened in 2021, like middle of 2020 and 2021, was a one-time occurrence. Mid-2020, 2021, and the beginning of 2022 was not normal, and we cannot expect it to go back to that. From personal experience, the people that I have talked to that are getting into this industry right now, they are extremely hopeful that the trucking market will return to those pandemic levels where the rates were insanely high. Guys, I want to be as clear on this as possible. 2021 especially, it was a unicorn. Will rates go up eventually? Yes, absolutely, because this market, it's cyclical. They will go up, but they will not go up to the rates that we saw in 2021. There were a lot of things, a perfect storm of things that happened to create such a boom in the trucking industry. We just cannot expect it to go back to that level unless something really insane happens again and creates a perfect storm to create the right environment for a freight market like we saw in 2021. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now the big thing. What was the net change in carrier population? How many total carriers increased or decreased in the industry if we take into account revocations and the new authorities? Well, here we go. We can see that there was a huge drop in carrier population in the month of May, and this is actually the second largest drop in net carrier population after January 2023, since these things were recorded starting in 2010. Now, as bad as this sounds, this is amazing news. Now, if we look at this chart as a whole, we can see that the decreases in net population are not comparable to the increases that happened from 2020 all the way to 2022. Now, why am I saying this? Because didn't we all say that those folks who got into the industry at the peak in 2021, where the equipment prices were insane, where they're continuing to finance that extremely overpriced equipment, didn't we say that those are the folks that are going to leave the industry first? Well, the numbers are telling a different story. It looks like, yeah, probably some are leaving, but definitely not at the rate that they entered the market. Partially, this is because carriers during this time were smart. They saved up money when the trucking industry was booming like they should have. And right now, they're not in such a dire situation as those who did not save up money. At least that's my opinion. You let me know what you think. Anyway, we all know that the net change in carrier population tells us only half of the story. Yes, there was a big drop, but we have to remember that a lot of carriers who shut down their doors, especially those smaller carriers, or even the larger carriers who employ drivers, they end up going to work for some other carrier, right? So in general, even though the number of MCs is decreasing, the actual amount of drivers and dispatchable trucks is not, because they are getting absorbed by other carriers. So to figure out what is happening, let's take a look at the for-hire trucking jobs for the month of May. So as you can see, this is us here now. Trucking jobs, for-hire trucking jobs, peaked somewhere right here in January of 2023. And right now, there are actually 2,200 jobs less as of May than in January 2023. In reality, what happened is we plateaued in terms of for-hire trucking jobs. Now let's take a look at these side by side. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at 2022. We can see that in 2022, there were, let's put it until here, somewhere from here to here, there were decreases in carrier population then too. But what was happening in 2022 is that the amount of jobs here, it was increasing. So we can assume that those carriers that went out of business, shut down their authorities here, they were absorbed by other carriers because the amount of for-hire trucking jobs was growing. Now, if we compare it to now, yes, we can see there is a huge decrease in carrier population, but at the same time, the jobs have plateaued, which means that a lot more carriers are going out of business, but there are the same amount of jobs, which means that these people who went out of business are not getting soaked up by other carriers, or at least not at the rate that they were before. In other words, we can assume from this information that the number of drivers is decreasing in the market. And of course, if the number of drivers is decreasing, that means the number of dispatchable trucks is also decreasing. Okay, now let's take a look at produce season. Since we are almost in the middle of June, we are all pretty much waiting for produce season to change our fate. Let's take a look at what in the world is going on. Now, before we actually dive into the numbers, I want to explain why produce season is so important for the trucking industry as a whole, not just reefers. So number one, produce heavy states, Texas, Arizona, California, Washington, maybe Idaho. When produce season starts kicking in, these states start having an increased need for those reefer trucks to move that produce because the volumes usually start going up. So what ends up happening is a lot of reefers that are here, wherever, they start all flocking to these produce-heavy states to be able to grab as many good-paying opportunities as possible. As this happens, those states that are not produce-heavy states end up experiencing a shortage of trucks because everyone is flocking to those produce states. So basically, because of the shortage, shippers of non-produce start hiking up their rates. Number two, reefers are currently competing with dry vans for those dry loads. Yes, not all dry van loads can go on a reefer, but a lot of them can. Now, if reefers start getting soaked up by the produce boom, then the competition decreases. And of course, as that happens, capacity decreases, and that will hike rates up. So that is why produce is so important for the trucking industry as a whole. This is a time where there's a domino effect where rates start climbing across the board. Now, the charts that I'll be showing you from this point on are all from USDA, and I will attach a link down below for you guys to be able to access them as well if you're interested in keeping tabs on produce season. First, we're going to look at weekly refrigerated truck volumes over time. These are volumes related to produce, and this is for everything in the US. It's not limited to a particular state or area. So I have labeled these. We see that this chart is from 2009 all the way to now. What I have labeled is the peaks, and the peaks tend to happen from the beginning to middle of May until the end of June. This is when produce volumes are the highest. If you take a look, 2009, 518 to 629, 2010, 11, and so on. Now we can see that these peaks started increasing in 2018. The highest level of volume was in 2021, and this is us right now. This is the beginning of May. This is as of yesterday, June 12th. What we can see is we are at the lowest point. Now, produce season have nothing really to do with the trucking industry. I mean, the trucking industry does not affect produce season or produce volumes. What does affect produce volumes is, of course, local governments and weather. So we can see that in 2022, there was a decrease in produce. This is because there was drought. And in California, I remember they did not let farmers develop their whole land. They limited them to how much land they can actually plant on and grow stuff on. Now this year, we have the opposite. It is too wet right now. So we can see that volumes decreased even further. Now, does this mean that produce season is going to stay at this level and we're not going to go any higher? No, not necessarily. I think what's going to happen is that produce season, as I keep saying, will be delayed, and we will see an increase and a peak in volume just a little bit later than the historical average. But we will see. Only time will tell. Now, this is the same chart, but this is for California only, since California is a huge produce market, right? A lot of produce grows here. We can see this is 2008. The peaks and valleys followed the same pattern until about 2018, and then it became a little bit wonky. But what we can see is that this year, yes, the volumes are increasing, which is good, but it is a pitiful amount of produce compared to prior years. Now, again, this is due to the wet conditions in California. A ton of produce had to be tossed out because of rot, so it might just be delayed, or here's hoping. The good news is that volumes are increasing right now, and that is always welcome. Then we have this chart, which is the reefer availability to haul these produce loads. Now, again, this is from 2008, but let me explain this chart for you. As you can see, the higher the number, the closer to 5, the more of a shortage there is in terms of trucks, right? So the higher the number, that means there are not enough trucks. The lower it is, the more of a surplus, too many trucks, right? So it's a little bit backwards, but just so you know. So let's take a look at what is happening today. So today we are trending at about a 3. This is an adequate amount of trucks, right? This means that there are enough trucks, just enough trucks to haul those produce loads. No surplus in capacity, no lack in capacity. So it is on its way up. as of yesterday. We can see this means that the capacity is getting a little bit tighter. But something you should know why I'm showing you this. If we are currently at an adequate level of trucks to haul those produce loads, and volumes are pretty dismal for produce, if those volumes go up, that capacity will tighten and those rates will go up. So here is hoping again. Now, for those of you, and I'm sure many of you are interested in rates, what are produce loads paying right now? Now, these rates are shipper rates. These are not broker rates. This is the amount shippers pay to brokers, and then brokers take a chunk into their pocket and pay the rest to the carrier. So this is from 2008. We can see this is from 2.2 per mile all the way to $4.80 per mile. Currently, if we look, this is going to shock a lot of you, I think. Currently, we're right here. We're at around $3.69 per mile as of yesterday. This is what shippers pay to brokers on average to haul those produce loads. Now, I am not going to go into a whole spiel again about brokers price gouging and so on, but you guys let me know. I haven't been working with a reefer for about 2.5 months now. So you let me know, do you see these rates on the load board? Are brokers paying you $3.69 on average? Probably not. So just remember, whatever brokers are paying you to move those produce loads are not even close to what they are getting from the shipper. Now, considering that volumes are on their way up for produce, capacity is adequate at this level where there is not a ton of volume, those rates will start going up even more. So keep an eye out. So finally, let's take a look at what commodities are being moved over the past 30 days and from where. This will give us an idea of where that volume is coming from and what that volume consists of. So here we go. Top 20 districts. This is a rolling 30-day window of what is coming out of where. What we can see right away is that most of the produce is coming from Mexico through Nogales. So that means those Nogales loads, those trucks that come from Mexico to Nogales, that's where you're going to get the biggest volume of produce. Now, these things include watermelons, we have grapes, tomatoes, cantaloupes, cucumbers, plum tomatoes, bell peppers, and then other produce here. The second biggest market is Mexico crossings through far Texas, another market where there are relatively more produce loads, avocados, limes, mangoes, other produce. We can see the third best is Salinas, Watsonville, California. Strawberries, lettuce, avocados, and other. But yeah, in general, the best place for volume in terms of produce is the Nogales area. But something to remember is Nogales is not a fun area to be in because of the wait times. I know from my personal experience, we have been stuck there for 3 days waiting on tomatoes that were going to Colorado. It was insane. So if you're prepared to wait for those produce loads, and if it makes sense in terms of the money you're getting paid, then Nogales is where there is that huge volume. So that's it for this video. We have some good news. Capacity is decreasing. We can see that it's not getting soaked up as much by those mega carriers offering jobs to those carriers who just left the business. So we can assume that the number of dispatchable trucks is also decreasing, which is good. We also have some hopeful news in terms of produce because volumes do seem to be going up and the rates seem to be going up as well. The only crappy news is the fact that it looks like produce is delayed, of course. And number two is that volumes and rates look like they will be lower than in prior years, which is of course not a good sign. Now, my father always taught me that you have to fight for your place under the sun. And hopefully that resonates with you as well. Just because it's not easy right now, and it sure is not easy right now, doesn't mean it's impossible. Keep your chins up and stop listening to people saying that everything and everyone is doomed for the months and years to come. Nothing is doomed. We are in a fluid situation. I'll admit we are not at the best point in time right now. There's no denying it, but this situation changes and can change on a daily basis. Learn to surf the wave, keep your head above water, and take it one step at a time. Wishing you all an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next video.